Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are objectively unpacking the third chapter of Ryuho Okawa's The Laws of Salvation. We're going to focus on a really fascinating aspect of the text, the author's argument for humanity's urgent need for spiritual evolution in the face of mounting global crises. We'll be looking closely at how the book connects our everyday, individual mindset directly to the geopolitical future of the world.
Here is how we're going to break this down. First, generating your own energy. Second, heavenly warnings through crises. Third, balancing material and spiritual. Fourth, the new Asian era. And finally, Japan's vision for humanity.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Generating Your Own Energy. What is super compelling about this chapter is how it grounds its massive, sweeping arguments at the most relatable individual level you can imagine, how we handle bad weather. The text points out a very human statistic, noting that over 90% of people feel unmotivated during the gloomy rainy season. We've all been there, right? But the author makes a really sharp point here. While it's completely normal to feel sluggish, letting the outside environment dictate your internal state of mind is a dangerous trap. According to the text, the antidote to this sluggishness is a concept called self-generation, or in Japanese, jikahatsuden. Basically, this means actively creating your own positive energy and motivation. It's about consciously refusing to use your environment as an excuse for your attitude. The book frames this ability, generating your own light when it's dark and glooming outside, as an absolutely crucial prerequisite for true leadership. And this is exactly where the author connects the micro to the macro. Self-generation isn't just some life hack for a rainy Tuesday. The text outlines it as the very first step to forming what it calls a rich heart. Building this individual internal resilience is presented as the foundational building block humanity needs before we can even hope to face much larger existential challenges. Which brings us to Section 2, Heavenly Warnings Through Crises. Once the text establishes this need for inner resilience, the narrative scope widens dramatically. We transition from everyday weather complaints straight into catastrophic global events. The book asserts that humanity is currently standing on the precipice of a highly dangerous era, one defined by a succession of unprecedented, almost unbelievable crises that form a really terrifying pattern. To illustrate this pattern, the text lists a rapid succession of devastating events, from the 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami, straight into Hurricane Katrina in the US in 2005, followed by the Myanmar cyclone and the Sichuan earthquake in China, both in 2008. The author uses this sheer concentration of tragedy to emphasize the massive scale of the crises we're facing. But crucially, the author doesn't view these just as random geological or meteorological tragedies. Instead, they're interpreted as intentional warnings from heaven. The argument here is that these disasters are actually an expression of a higher will, a loud and clear signal that humanity's current trajectory is dangerously flawed and requires immediate correction. Let's look closer at that in Section 3, Balancing Material and Spiritual. So, if these disasters are a warning, what exactly is heaven warning humanity about? Well, according to the text, it's about a drastic imbalance between our physical world and our inner world. The book posits that while the last 150 years have brought incredible material development, think immense convenience, technological leaps, and scientific progress, humanity has fundamentally lacked the necessary spiritual development to match it. We've built the machinery of the future, but the text argues we lack the faith and the rich heart required to properly and safely wield this material wealth. The author warns that focusing solely on the material world completely destroys a vital balance. Without spiritual growth to temper our technological power, humanity becomes arrogant. And it's precisely this arrogance, this massive spiritual deficit, that the text claims is triggering those repeated crisis scenarios we just looked at. Moving right along to Section 4, the new Asian era. The author doesn't just leave this spiritual imbalance floating in the abstract realm. He projects it directly onto international geopolitics. The text predicts a turbulent shift, forecasting that America is going to step back from its historic, post-war role as the world police. By shifting toward a more self-centered domestic approach, the U.S. leaves a massive power vacuum on the global stage. In the wake of this American retreat, the text asserts that the center of global gravity will shift dramatically. The balance of power is going to enter what the author terms the era of the Asian Three Kingdoms, a period driven by intense and perhaps chaotic competition between Japan, China, and India. But the book definitely doesn't frame this new era as a peaceful transition. Instead, it highlights severe impending danger. The text specifically warns about the existential threat that could come from expanding military capabilities and nuclear armament within this ageal theater, as these three powers vie for dominance in a spiritually unbalanced world. Finally, we reach Section 5, Japan's Vision for Humanity. Amidst all this impending geopolitical chaos and global spiritual deficit, the text outlines a very specific, urgent mission. According to the author, Japan has a unique duty in this new era. The text calls for Japan to establish a spiritually resolute foundation, not just for itself, but to transmit a unifying future vision to properly guide the rest of the world. The ultimate argument of this chapter is that Japan must generate and broadcast a future vision based on spiritual truth. The stakes, according to the book, literally could not be higher. This vision is required to prevent humanity from facing repeated, apocalyptic, end-of-the-world level catastrophes brought on by that huge imbalance of material wealth and spiritual poverty. And bringing this grand, global vision full circle, the text implies a pretty simple truth. Establishing this global leadership requires the exact same kind of individual inner resilience introduced at the very beginning of the chapter. That conscious self-generation. You simply can't lead the world out of darkness if you don't know how to generate your own light. Which leaves us with a profound question drawn directly from our analysis today. Can humanity collectively generate the necessary spiritual resilience to survive the consequences of our own material progress? It's an incredibly compelling framework for looking at the challenges of our modern era, and definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself complaining about a rainy day. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.